Thousands of people are continuing to stream across the US-Canada border illegally from the United States into Canada and then claim asylum at the Roxham Road border crossing in Quebec. This is one of the biggest public policy challenges we have in Canada right now. It's placing a huge strain on many of our social programs, the most recent example of which being the mayor of Toronto coming out and essentially stating that the Toronto homeless shelter system can't take any more people because there are thousands of people who have illegally entered the country at this crossing, have either been shipped there or have made their way there, and the city can't take any more now. This is after he declared the city a sanctuary city with no plan, but I'm going to park that. I want to talk about ways that we can solve this problem. Now, you know that for well over a year, I've been coming to you with videos. I've been in the House of Commons, in our committee, holding the minister to account, raising motions, trying to get the Liberals to A, acknowledge that this is a problem, hashtag welcome to Canada, and then B, trying to get them to actually solve the problem rather than their approach, which is to make things worse by throwing hundreds of millions of dollars for things like setting up a tent city or a refugee camp at the US-Canada border, for essentially turning our RCMP forces into a concierge service to help people's luggage, having to backstop provincial governments because of the strain that this is placing on healthcare, on education. We need to have a solution to this problem that is not more money, because frankly, I don't think this is compassionate. I don't think it's prioritizing the world's most vulnerable into our immigration system, and it's not sustainable. So what is the legislative solutions that we have to actually stop the problem? Justin Trudeau and his Liberals won't go there. So it's been up to myself, and I have a very small team of staff, there's only 4 of us, that we've been trying to come up with ways that the government could close the loophole in something called the Safe Third Country Agreement. And this is the problem that is actually allowing this situation to happen. And I'll briefly explain it to you for those of you who don't know what it is. The Safe Third Country Agreement was signed in 2002 between the United States and Canada, essentially acknowledging that if somebody reaches one of our countries, they've reached a safe country. And if they have reached that country, they shouldn't be able to enter the other country and then claim asylum. It's to prevent people from shopping on asylum systems. And we saw that as a problem in the early 2000s. That's why this agreement was signed. The problem is the way that Canada has interpreted this through its own law. It actually only applies at official ports of entry. So, first of all, I started by saying this loophole needs to be closed because it only applies at official points of entry. People who illegally enter the country can be in the United States and then claim asylum in Canada. Obviously it needs to be closed. The government still hasn't even acknowledged that this is a problem. But what I found is that a lot of pundits in the media who might be sympathetic to the Liberal position have come up with a lot of reasons, and the Liberal ministers have as well, why we can't do this. They've said, well, the Americans are never going to renegotiate this agreement. Well, the Liberals have never even asked them to do so. So there's that. Then they said, well, when I suggested that why don't we, for the purposes of the explicit purpose of enforcing the Safe Third Country Agreement, deem the entire Canadian border an official point of entry so that it would apply, the public safety minister came out and said, oh, no, we'd have to, have RCMP along the entire border, and we'd have to have bricks and mortar infrastructure, and it's laughable. It's never going to happen. Then other pundits and whatnot have said, well, the United States would never allow us to enforce our sovereign rights on our border because they wouldn't take people back, that they would scrap the agreement. We've seen no evidence of this. In fact, I don't think that the Americans are super happy about the fact that their country is now becoming essentially a way station for people who are entering their country on American visas, like the Nigerian cohort that the minister has talked about a lot, to come to Canada to claim asylum. So we need to be looking at legislative options to deal with this problem. So the House has risen for the summer. I'm in Ottawa today. My staff and I have been looking at ways that we could do this. Now, before I get into what I think a potential solution is that doesn't cost hundreds of millions of dollars, I just want to state the fact that the Liberals have thousands of staff to do this. The Liberals have the majority on the Immigration Committee. They could have suggested a study on this. Like, we've been pushing motion after motion to examine the border crossing crisis, to come up with legislative solutions, but they're just not doing this work. So here's one potential solution. I'm going to give you some detail, especially for people in the media who might want to look into this. We have a piece of legislation in Canada called the Immigration Refugee Protection Act, and this is the piece of legislation that essentially governs how people are treated when they claim asylum in Canada, who's eligible, who's not, process, all of these sorts of things. This is the act. The short form is, we call it IRPA. So I started with the ineligibility section of this bill. That's section 101.1, and there's 6 criteria under which claims are ineligible to be referred, the asylum claims are ineligible to be referred. And one that really caught my eye was section E. So section 101.1E of IRPA says that a claim is ineligible to be referred to the Refugee Protection Division if the claimant came directly or indirectly to Canada from a country designated by the regulations other than a country of their nationality or their former habitual residence. I'm going to stop right there because I know that's a lot of sort of legal speak, but essentially what this is talking about is the application of the Safe Third Country Agreement. So when it says a country designated by the regulations, I wanted to see what the regulations said. So the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations, that document, when it is looking at that particular section that I just read, under section 159.41 of the regulations, it says that paragraph 101.1E of the Act, that thing that I just read to you, does not apply to a claimant who seeks to enter Canada at a location that is not a port of entry. So in reading this, it seems to me that our regulations are the thing that are our Canadian regulations, the things that we've written that legislators have control over right now, are what is actually interpreting the Safe Third Country Agreement not to apply to the entire border. So why can't we just repeal this section? That's in our power to do. Then the loophole would be closed. Might we have a month of difficulty with, let's say how many people are going to cross the border next month? 5,000? I don't know. I think the government should by now, but projections have been in the thousands. So let's say there's 5,000 people who cross the border next month that all of a sudden, if this applied, they would be caught, and we'd have to essentially, they would have come thinking that they could make an asylum claim, but they'd have to go back to the US. Are the Americans going to be super excited about that, taking all of those people back? I don't know, but I think that they would be a lot more amiable to talk to us about ways to stop 5,000 more, or however many it's going to be every month, from continuing to abuse this loophole. I think that there's an opportunity for us to work with our partners in the American government. And again, regardless of how you feel about the current American administration, the fact remains that the United States is one of the freest countries in the world. It has a free press, it has a free court system, it has checks and balances in all of its branches of government. You don't have to take my word for it. Justin Trudeau himself last week said the United States continues to be a safe third country. So if that is the case, then this agreement should apply to the entire border. The other thing was, I actually looked at how the Americans apply the Safe Third Country Agreement, and their regulations are a lot stricter than ours. So it's their own regulations actually apply the Safe Third Country Agreement in a different way that Canadians do. So why wouldn't we be repealing this section or making changes to the regulations? If I can figure this out with 4 very hardworking staff, and I have to give credit to them because they've been doing a lot of diligent research on this, why hasn't the government, I'm sure the government must have a briefing note somewhere. I'm going to make sure that I'm A-tipping all of that, telling them that these are some of the legislative options available to them. This is stuff that the Liberals should have been bringing up to study at committee. The fact that Parliament rose and our only solution coming out of Canada to deal with this is Justin Trudeau spending more of your money that we don't have is not acceptable. So there we have it. Discuss that. Repeal section 159.41 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Regulations. And I think we might have an ability to solve this problem. At least I'm looking for solutions that don't cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Working hard for you in Ottawa. Have a great day.